When I began my career back in the early 1980s, there were still big unanswered questions about what it takes to make a long-term romantic relationship work. I mean, there were a lot of theories, but there were very few scientifically proven facts. But since then, some of the best research in all of psychology has been on relationships. We know things we didn't know before. For example, among all the bad things that happen in relationships, the vast majority of them can all be traced back to a single source. And that source is the absence of a specific set of abilities that are so important that researchers say they're really not optional. When they measured the relative presence or absence of this set of abilities, they could predict the eventual fate of relationships with over 90% accuracy. They also found things that happen on a daily basis in relationships that are more than just annoying. They're highly predictive of relationship failure. The basic takeaway from these studies is that if you want to stand a chance of having a relationship that goes well over time, you have to have a specific set of abilities, and you have to avoid a specific set of negative habits. Estimates are that only about 1 in 4 Americans meet these conditions. You know, the bar is much higher than we tend to think it is, but the numbers don't lie. But along with this bad news, there's good news too. If you happen to be one of the people who has the full set of positive abilities and you avoid the negative habits, you, my friend, are almost guaranteed the kind of love relationship that you'd like to have. It's amazing to me that, even though this information has been around for decades, there are a lot of people still wandering around believing the question of how can I get more responsiveness from my partner? How can I get more caring? That it's a great mystery. It's not. We know exactly what people need to do if they want to get more responsiveness from their partners. But knowing what partners need to do is one thing, motivating them to do it is another. Simply educating people doesn't seem to be enough. That's where pragmatic experiential therapy for couples comes in. Through a specific interlocking set of protocols and procedures, Petsy motivates clients to do the things that will get them the kind of relationships that they'd like to have. And once they become motivated, Petsy also gives them concrete, step-by-step tools, practices, and exercises they can use to get where they want to be in their relationships. The basic Petsy strategy is straightforward. We start by meeting partners right where they're at, which is often reeling from betrayals or gridlocked in standoffs about certain issues. Walls are up, motivation is down, sometimes detachment is set in. Well, we do 3 things. First, we identify the specific things that each partner wants or needs the most from the other. Second, we help partners understand that the way they're going about trying to get these things is highly predictive of them never getting these things. And third, we help them get these things by beginning to think and act like people who almost always get these things. Change starts happening almost immediately. You know, it's not rocket science. We've been doing this over and over again for over 30 years at the Couples Clinic and Research Institute. Regardless of what kind of mess people come in with, we help them get out of the mess by learning to think and act like people who almost always get out of the messes they're in, and usually keep them from getting into the messes in the first place. So you might ask, what are these abilities that are so powerful? Well, by the time you finish Petsy training, you'll know them like the back of your hand, but I can say a few things about them here. For starters, there's often a misconception. They're not communication skills. They have more to do with internal qualities like open-mindedness, flexibility, the ability to feel a measure of what your partner is feeling, the ability to care about what your partner is feeling, the amount of desire you have for physical and emotional connection, the willingness to count your partner's feelings as much as your own, even when they don't make as much sense to you as your own, And they also involve the unwillingness to accept situations where your partner is unwilling to count your feelings as much as theirs. Actually, people who do well in relationships are willing to rock the boat when they need to, but they do it in a way where they don't unnecessarily stir up their partner's defenses. These people know how to stand up for themselves without putting their partners down, and without even making a big deal of the fact that they had to stand up for themselves in the first place. These people have a very different attitude than the rest of us. I mean, they really don't blame their partners for being selfish or controlling or inflexible. They just don't let them do it. But there's also one more ability that is even more important. I kind of think of it as the master ability, and that has to do with the ability to relax and feel temporarily okay, even though you don't like the way that things are going, and without necessarily giving up on your determination to get the kind of changes that you think are valid and legitimate and fair. It involves the ability to temporarily let go of your agenda long enough to listen, take in new information, see the bigger picture, get outside of yourself, put things in perspective. There's absolutely no question in my mind. People who are able to do this are much, much more likely to thrive in their relationships. If you can't relax and temporarily feel okay, let go of your agenda for a few moments and listen when you don't like the way your partner is acting, you operate with a kind of desperation, agitation, alarm, or just frustration that will interfere with your effectiveness every single time. I've come to believe that everybody has some of this ability, but for some reason, we won't use it until we've exhausted every other avenue possible. But from the moment people start using it, they become more effective. It's crazy. Well, with Petsy, we're reminding people of this fact all the time. And we're often starting in the middle of circumstances where it's the most difficult for people to do it. Here's how it goes. We ask people to start having conversations about significant hurts or significant issues. They start talking with each other. When they start talking to each other, each person usually gets off track and starts behaving in ways that are highly predictive of unresponsiveness from their partner. So we pause the action and we go one-on-one with each partner so the other person isn't present. The other person we ask to take a seat in the waiting room for a few minutes or whatever. We do three things. First, we offer understanding and strong support for the legitimate things that this person is trying to get from their partner. For example, to a partner who was feeling criticized just a moment ago, we're one-on-one and we're saying things like, yeah, she's not listening to you, right? It's like she's already made up her mind, right? Okay, I think she needs to understand there are reasons why you did that. I want you to know I'm not going to rest until she's able to really hear you. Okay, so are we on the same page with that? So that's usually comforting to the client. The second thing we do is we begin creating the sense for the partner that this is a decision point. There's a fork in the road right now. On one hand, you can keep doing the things that you're doing, which will take you in the same direction that your relationship has been going. But on the other hand, there are specific things that you can say and do right here, right now, right smack dab in the middle of this frustrating situation that will begin having the effect of getting more responsiveness from your partner. And then we give them a feel for what we're talking about by inviting them to imagine that they're resuming the conversation in just a few minutes with their partner, and they're looking and sounding something like this. And then we speak as if we are the client talking to the partner in the upcoming conversation. And what we're doing is we're inviting the client to try it on for size, see how it feels. So then we model for the client the specific kinds of things that they would be saying to themselves and that they would be saying to their partner if they were going to be more effective when they resume the conversation. These things that we model are always some variety of open-mindedness, flexibility, willingness to give equal regard and unwillingness to accept situations where they are not being given equal regard. So we translate these qualities into the client's exact situation. We give them a very specific example of the exact kind of words and the kind of thinking that they would be doing if they were going to be more effective in this situation. And meanwhile, the client is usually trying these things on. They're asking, could I say this? Could I think this way? And then we move into the third thing. We ask, okay, so when you were imagining yourself talking to your partner like that, how were you feeling? I mean, did it feel comfortable, or was there something inside that, no, I don't want to do that, or I don't think I should do that, or come on, let's talk about it. So basically, we're doing with the client what we're hoping the client will do more with their partner. You remember the master ability I was talking about just a minute ago? Yeah, so we're setting aside our own agenda. I mean, clearly, we have an agenda for the client to go back in and be looking and sounding like that example we gave. But we know that when we make a suggestion like this, usually there's some feeling of resistance in the client. So we want to welcome that. We invite the reservations. Heck, we roll out the red carpet for these reservations. We give them the seat of honor. And then we listen. We understand. We acknowledge understandable things about the client's reservations. What we know is that the client needs to get these reservations out and process them, be able to look at them and take them to their logical conclusions. And when you provide an affirming presence for the client to do this, a lot of times they answer their own reservations. But even if they don't, once they're able to get their objections and reservations off their chest and feel heard, they're much more able to be receptive to our further suggestions. When we model openness and flexibility, the most typical objection that comes up inside of the client is, it won't work. Clients usually feel like, I could be open-minded and flexible until the cows come home, and that's not going to inspire my partner to be that way as well. So we do our typical thing. I mean, we welcome this reservation, give it the seat of honor, roll out the red carpet, we basically offer validation. We're saying things like, well, that could very well be true, although I'm not sure that you would really know, because honestly, I've never seen you be open and flexible in that way before, and you might be surprised. But let's assume for the moment it doesn't work. Even though you're open and flexible, your partner remains closed and inflexible. That's no problem. I mean, you're just getting started with the openness and flexibility part? Here, give me an example of what your partner might say in response to you being open and flexible the way I was talking just a minute ago. So the client usually comes up with the worst case scenario, their partner being completely unreasonable and disrespectful. That's good, though. That gives us a chance to model exactly how they can stand up for themselves, step by step, in an imagined conversation where they're portraying the worst possible responses from their partner. So this back and forth between, on one hand, pragmatic straight talk about the realities of their situation and exactly what the client needs to do for things to go better, and then shifting over into making space for experiential processing, where the client is welcome to express their objections, their reservations, their hesitations, and then process them through. This back and forth that we keep doing over and over again is really the cornerstone of pragmatic experiential therapy for couples. And it almost always creates a shift, and the client is able to resolve their reservations. I think it's because they can sense that we know what we're talking about, and we're not trying to jam it down their throat. With every single client, we end up saying things that are difficult for this person to hear. And we say it in a straightforward, no-nonsense kind of way. We don't beat around the bush. But a good therapist knows how to say things in a way that go down easy. In PETSI training, therapists learn 14 different ways to make it easy for their clients to be receptive to their feedback. One of these ways involves giving the feedback one-on-one in a private setting, not in front of other people, not even in front of the client's partner. When the partner is present, the client has this split attention thing going on where they're trying to focus on their own reactions, but they're also keeping an eye on their partner's reactions to whatever it is that they're saying and doing. And so they can't really dig in, think things through, process through their reactions, and take them to their logical conclusions, and then come back to the main dilemma. Am I going to step up to the plate or not? Most people, when their partners start behaving badly, they believe the single most important thing that needs to happen is my partner needs to shape up and fly right. And so when we say, hey, wait a minute, it's not that simple, they usually disagree. They believe it is that simple. What they don't understand is that the vast majority of things that partners get upset with each other about aren't about right and wrong. They're about legitimately different priorities and preferences. And once they get upset with each other, both partners are usually doing things that are detrimental to relationships. But the initial things they get upset about are rarely about right and wrong. There's a wide variety of ways of prioritizing and doing things that can work in relationships. And one of the most basic but deadly mistakes a person can make is believe that their priorities and preferences are right and their partners are wrong, or even that theirs are, objectively speaking, better. It's true that there are a handful of things that have been proven scientifically to be damaging to relationships, but there's only about 8 of them. The rest of the time, when people believe their mates are being selfish, irresponsible, lazy, insensitive, it's as much in the eye of the beholder as it is truly objective. But even when things happen that are truly wrong, studies suggest that the reactions of partners are often just as harmful to the relationships as the wrong things that were done in the first place. Regardless of whether your partner does things that are truly wrong or just frustratingly different than what you wanted, the way you react turns out to be one of the strongest predictors of the eventual fate of relationships. No one gets to escape being in the position of having to react to things their partners do that they don't like. It happens all the time in long-term love relationships. And it's going to continue to happen to some degree just by virtue of the fact that you and your partner are 2 different people. The bottom line is, the moments when people need to be the most skillful in their relationships, they're often not even trying. To them, their reactions aren't even part of the equation. And yet the strongest predictor of your partner's continuing behavior is precisely how you handle it when you don't like that behavior. When people react in dysfunctional ways when they're upset with their partners, but they don't realize that their dysfunctional reactions are just as harmful to their relationships as their partner's upsetting actions, it'll seem to them that their partner's behavior is the main problem. Well, once this happens, it's off to the races. The belief that one's partner is more to blame for the depleted condition of your relationship spawns contempt. Contempt is what happens anytime one partner sees themselves as being on a higher plane than the other partner. Among all the bad things that happens in relationships, contempt's the worst. It's the single strongest predictor of relationship demise. When a person senses that their partner believes that they are the main problem, even when they try and ignore it, it's really difficult to swim upstream against the current of their partner's attitude. The belief that one's partner is more to blame puts a chokehold on relationships. Once it happens, nothing good follows. This is why in PETSI, the first order of business involves helping partners understand that they've been biased in their assessment of overall blame, and to recognize that this bias is no small mistake. When you make this mistake, you wander into extremely dangerous relationship territory where few relationships survive. We take our time to gently help clients see this, and we respond patiently to each of their objections or questions. But if they're still unwilling to see or acknowledge the significance of their own detrimental behavior, we don't hesitate to use strong language to get their attention. For example, We might say something like, I'm going to be honest with you. The way you tend to react when you're upset with your partner places you squarely in the company of people who rarely get the kind of caring and responsiveness that they'd like to have. I mean, right now, you're the poster child for how to unnecessarily stir up resistance in your partner. I don't think you hear what I'm saying. I believe you have some habits that if you don't change them will likely sink any relationship that you try and be in. You might think that this would be the end of your relationship with the client, and their first reactions are often defensive, but in Petsy, the client rarely stays defensive because after we say things that are most likely to stir up defenses in the client, we proceed to show ourselves to be harmless in 14 different ways. A central skill of the Petsy therapist involves learning how to give straight, no-nonsense critical feedback while making it very easy for the client to be receptive and difficult for the client to discount what the therapist is saying. And I believe this is why many experts in the field of couples therapy believe that Petsy is a treatment model that's especially effective with really difficult cases. I think they're right. It's the combination that makes Petsy effective. It's not just the straight talk about the client's self-defeating behavior. There's also clear modeling of effective alternatives. And then there's the making space for the client's objections, understanding them, taking the time that's needed for clients to resolve them. We don't want the client to override their objections, right? We model specific things to kick off a process where the client realizes a number of things. Number one, that there are specific things they could do in any frustrating situation that will dramatically raise the odds that their partner will be flexible and responsive, right? Let's not pretend that this is not true. Number two, recognize that they're in no frame of mind right now to do these things. I mean, from where they're at right now, they couldn't do it without pretending or mouthing the words. Number three, recognize that it's in their own best interest to try to get to a place where they could feel comfortable doing these things. And number four, recognize that one way to get there is to be open to the things that we have to say. It's a really awesome thing to see a client move from a position of blame to a position of empowerment and self-responsibility where they decide, you know what? I'm going to be one of those people who knows how to get their partners to treat them well. And I'm not going to be one of those people who don't have the abilities needed for their relationship to go well. You can tell when things really begin to click for a client. For one thing, they start feeling more upset that they reacted in the same old way when they're frustrated than they are about the frustrating thing their partner did. And they often come in for one-on-one sessions saying things like, my partner did the same old frustrating, annoying stuff this week, but let's forget about that. I'd like to talk about how I reacted because I know that if I can just develop the ability to stay open and flexible and stand up for myself without making a big deal of it, eventually my partner will do less and less frustrating things. Well, when clients begin doing this regularly, they're often amazed to see how quickly big issues that have brought their relationships to a standstill get resolved. But we don't stop there. Giving partners the space to resolve their reservations and make the decision over and over again to step up to the plate during therapy sessions is one thing. Being able to do it on their own when you're not there, that's an entirely different thing.